6 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I got a compliment before Christmas that the favorite part of our show, Robin, is when we talk to authors.
Yes.
And I'll be honest with you. My favorite authors are the ones who have stories that I can relate to, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. You know, and I guess that's true for all of us. So maybe I can relate to this next author because I'm old. You think it's part of it? Or maybe it's because I'm older. You know, not old. Maybe old is next. Maybe right now I'm older. You get rid of the ER after you get older than older?
I think so. You get more mature.
More
Just
mature.
Get rid of the word old.
Dr. Roni Beth Tower is on the phone. She wrote a book called Miracle at Midlife, and just the title alone tells you why I can relate to it. The miracle part, though, should I admit that I cried a little bit, Robin?
Yes.
No, I won't admit that. I'm not going to tell the world that. That's just between you and me. The microphones will be on in just a little bit, right?
All right. Okay.
They're not on yet. Dr. Roni Beth Tower is a clinical psychologist and advocate for bringing comfort and joy to people. She's a contributor to Psychology Today, Woman's World, The Huffington Post, Psychology and Aging. She's a dancer, a quilter. You never get paid enough if you're a quilter, by the way.
No.
Your quilts will never pay for the amount of time you put into those things. I was going to buy one for Christmas. I couldn't believe it was like $40 at Cracker Barrel.
Yes.
And you know the lady who made them spent probably 100 hours making these things.
Yeah.
How did she get away with selling it for $40? She just goes broke.
I know.
Anyway, Miracle at Midlife, a transatlantic romance. Dr. Roni Beth Tower, good morning, Doctor. What an honor to have you on our show.
Good morning, Larry, and I am just delighted to be on your show.
Why did I cry with your story? What does it say something about me, Doctor? Let me get laid down on the couch. Hold on. What did it say about me?
Well, the curious thing about my book is people relate to it so differently out of their own experience, and I need to know what part of it made you cry.
Hope. There was a part in the book. I can't remember because when did we get this book? It's been a while already.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, but we read a lot of books. Anyway, there was something hopeful. There was something like, oh my God, it's not over yet. It's not over yet. Look, this is like hope, right?
Exactly.
Did this happen to you?
I was done. I was 52 years old. I was done. I thought, this is the end of that kind of loving for me. And I had to learn that it's never too late to love and be loved and to learn.
Well, if we were going to think of a romantic city, Paris, for some reason, comes to mind, even if we've never been there, which I have never been there. So did Paris was that a real part of the story for you, or did you choose Paris because of that connection with romance?
No, the reason I chose Paris was because when I was 19 years old, I was going into my senior year of college, and I had no home. My mother had moved out to California. She'd left Ohio. My father had remarried, and my stepmother had 3 kids of her own, was not interested in me. And there was nowhere to go that summer, so I saved my babysitting money, and I went to Paris and studied at the Sorbonne that summer in 1963. And when I left, I said, this is the most romantic place on earth. I'm not coming back till I can come back with a man I love. And Larry, I never had that opportunity. So when I was 52, and I opened the newspaper and I saw an ad for Air France, $279 round trip to Paris, I said, woman, you are 52 years old. It is not going to happen. You get on a plane and go back. You do not have to spend the rest of your life never going back to that gorgeous city. And it was something I knew I needed to do. I'd made this silly promise to myself, and it was time to let it go and move into the future.
So what happened? I mean, did that chemistry thing happen?
I don't know what happened was so bizarre. It was chemistry, but it was everything else. When I met David, I was armored. I mean, I was done with relationships. I was done. I had my kids. I loved my kids. I loved my work. I was happy. And David was done too. And I got out of that elevator. I saw him standing against the pillar of that hotel. He was wearing a hat at a jaunty angle. He always wore a hat. and something inside of me just kind of shifted.
Really?
And he looked at
I'm taking
me,
notes.
and
I got to wear my hat on the jaunty angle.
oh,
I got to figure out what that is. A jaunty angle.
but I didn't let it in. I didn't let it in until I got back on the plane, because I was so certain that certainly nothing was going to happen that weekend. And nothing did happen, except I fell head over heels in love with him. But I didn't know that until I was on the airplane on my way home.
But as a psychologist, don't you see a lot of women who don't let these things happen to them because something has happened to them in their lives that they have learned to not trust men? But you, it sounds like you were willing and open to trusting somebody.
I had to learn to trust David, and a good chunk of the book is about how he dealt with my learning to trust him. And there was much I needed to learn to trust. The biggest thing I needed to learn to trust was that if he died on me, like my husband Stewart had done, I would be able to survive it, and it would have been worthwhile loving him in the first place for however long we had together. And that's one of the great lessons of my life.
Did he know you thought that thought? Did he know about that thought? Because I would have been scared. If I die on you, what do you know that I don't know?
Well, I think he was unbelievably patient, and he was very gentle with me. He understood that we each had so much to bring to each other that was exactly what we needed. It was just one of those fits at so many different levels. And it just took me a long time to trust David. And then there was the complication of he lived in France. So, of course, I was worried about the whole French thing.
Yeah. Did you
for
speak
a
French?
long time.
Did you speak French?
I had spoken it when I was young, but when I hadn't spoken it in years. I hadn't spoken it in over 40 years. No, not 40 years, over 30 years at that point. But it started to come back once I got there. Now, David, of course, was fluent. He'd lived there 25 years at that point.
Where was he from originally?
He was originally, he was born in the United States, and his family moved. David went to 15 schools before 8th grade. Now, think about that.
Wow, that's a lot.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Go ahead.
When he chose to make Paris his home, it was a very free choice because he had no attachments to any one place particularly. He could choose a place that he really loved being.
Really?
And that's what took him back to Paris for basically his adult career.
And that's one of the things we learned from your book. We learned that we as individuals can survive, but it really is most incredible to be able to share life and survival with a partner as opposed to by yourself.
Robin, yes, bravo, yes. There's a proverb that says sharing doubles joy and halves grief, and it does. Having been able to be with David now, we're almost at 22 years. Every single day is new, and it's amazing, and it's the being able to share it that makes it that way.
You've got a New Yorkness about you, but you're from Ohio. What happened? How did that happen? How did you get to New York? What am I picking up on?
I don't know what you're picking up on.
Doesn't she have a New Yorkness about her?
Yeah, I think so. Well, she's very positive, though.
I don't know what that means exactly.
But she's very positive. Ronnie Beth is.
Well, I don't know what you mean about
a New
Yorker. I actually feel that from being a Midwesterner, my Ohio roots, which are very deep, then I moved east, but I lived in Connecticut. I that was where I landed, and I had my kids there. I raised them there. And Connecticut's more New England than New York.
Right. Yeah.
We have just landed in this little village in the Hudson Valley since we've been back in the United States. So I identify myself more as a Connecticut type person for the eastern part. But I appreciate the differences.
Well, I do this thing, and this is kind of a me thing, that I do this thing, try to figure out where somebody is from. And because you've already told me Ohio, I would have guessed wrong. I would have not guessed Ohio for some reason.
Would you have picked up on the San Francisco piece?
No, not at all. You sound like a New York girl.
I am not a New Yorker. I mean...
Oh, I just found your picture. I just put your picture on the podcast. Okay, and if you've been watching the podcast, the cover of the book is what I just had up there before I put Roni Beth's picture up there. So tell me about your life as a writer. Have you been writing a lot?
I've written my whole life, but I only wrote science. I only published science until after I retired, and then I retired, and I'd always wanted to learn to quilt. I learned to quilt, and I think it was that nonverbal trying to make something beautiful out of the scraps and the pieces that made me want to get those faxes that David had saved out of the file box and put them together and tell the story.
It's a metaphor.
Because it's a pretty amazing story. Yes, it's a metaphor. It is a metaphor.
You encounter a lot of people, not just personally one-on-one, but through your writings in major publications. And it's just really amazing how people crave the emotional aspect of a relationship as opposed to putting the physical needs of a relationship first.
Oh, Robin, the important thing is to put it all together and not disconnect them. That's where one of the major places people get into trouble. The physical is communication. It's a way of talking to one another.
You're a marriage counselor. I like that advice. That's good advice. Men like to hear that, don't they? Yeah, don't forget the physical.
But Larry, it's so true. One of the pieces, after I published the book, I thought, well, I have all these things I can say that kind of a lot of them are embedded in the book, and I started writing all these posts for Psychology Today, and one of the pieces I did was called 22 Benefits of Sex After 50. And that I expanded, and I also put it on Huffington Post. It's on the front page of my website, www.miracleatmidlife.com. And it goes through benefits that go from the neurochemistry to the spiritual. But for me, the more levels that we can connect with someone on, the deeper the bonds are and the more meaningful they are. Yes, there's the chemistry, there's the plumbing and the wiring, but there's the spiritual side.
Well, do you know what I've always kind of, I guess, been disappointed in, I think, is this, and maybe you can help me not be disappointed. I've been disappointed in the science behind romance. When, in the course of our lives, when we fall in love, and we get whatever feeling that is, and then a scientist or some biologist or something will say, well, that's because of a chemical, and they'll tell you what chemical it is. And it's like, really? All I am is at the mercy of my chemicals? There's no real spiritual thing happening there. But it sounds like, I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but it's disappointing to me to think that it's all about chemical reactions.
I could not agree with you more, because it is definitely not all about chemistry. It is not about testosterone and oxytocin, and that is not what it is about. And the problem with science, when I started my own blog, I called it Love is Real, because too much science doesn't want to believe things unless they can be measured.
Yes.
Unless they're visible. Well, think of all the things that are so real that are not visible. We just had a Nobel Prize awarded for documenting gravitational waves. Einstein said 100 years ago we have gravitational waves. We have gravity. This is real.
Right.
It's as real as sound waves and light waves.
Right.
But because it wasn't measured, people didn't believe it. That's the problem with science. It's really important to know that things that are invisible can be real, things that have not yet been measured are very real, and we don't have good scientific ways of measuring love because we limit the levels that people look at.
Right. Yeah, I like what you're saying, and I think that too. I don't understand it either. I mean, you can have a man and a woman. Let's just use that as an example. I know there are many variables, but just use that for sake of simpleness. And everything is perfect. They're attracted to each other. They like each other. They have fun together. But something else is not there. So the chemical stuff must be there. But yet, all of a sudden, you bump into this one person that, I don't know, God puts in your path or something. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh, my gosh, this is different. And I don't know that science can measure that either.
No, and I don't understand how the universe puts people together exactly the way they need to encounter each other. But it has happened again and again and again through my life that souls I have needed to be in contact with came into my life or I came into theirs.
But in your case, you had Stewart and David, and both... And were both serving you in the same way? I mean, did you have the same...
Yes, I am convinced that Stewart, who died, in 20 minutes in front of my eyes at Disneyland in 1984, I am convinced that he saw me lonely and sad, and his spirit decided he needed to find the perfect man for me, and he could not have found anybody more perfect than David. The fact that we ever met each other is so bizarre, but that's how the universe arranges things.
Wow.
But it seems like timing has played a very important role, too, because you had children, and you had to make sure that your children were taken care of before you could venture off on your own.
I did. I had to know that I had been responsible and I had raised them. And the parts of myself that I had put on hold that Stewart had been so wonderful with, especially the little girl inside of me, I nicknamed her the Brat in the book.
Yes.
But her, and also the woman who loved that bottle of perfume. Mm-hmm. The year he gave me a bottle of perfume in a briefcase and a bottle of perfume, was saying he could accept all of me. And that's what David could do. And I needed a very special man to be able to embrace all of who I was. Just like David. David needed me to be able to, he was really a loner. He needed me to be able to bring him more into the world of people.
Mm-hmm.
There was a part of the book where he's carrying a suitcase to Paris, I think. And you said it was a large suitcase, and I was wondering if that wasn't a metaphor for, how when we meet somebody late in life, you always say they've got baggage, and it sounds like, and I don't know if you meant it that way, but it was willing to take on that extra baggage.
Oh, when he picked up, I had a friend whose husband had business in Paris, and he volunteered to take a suitcase over. I don't want to spoil the end of the book.
Okay.
But let's skip that, and let's go to the other extreme of that, which is that I flew over on that first weekend. Everything I had for the weekend was in a small cotton tote bag that my best friend from Akron had given me for my 50th birthday. And everything I needed was in this little, tiny cotton carry-on that just went right into the overhead. I was traveling light, and I was letting go of everything that needed to be let go to be able to move into the future.
And that takes courage.
Yeah.
That really, really does.
It took faith.
Oh, okay.
It took faith. And my life had shown me my life had shown me, I do believe in God, and my life had shown me that God was going to take care of me, that I was going to get the lessons I needed to have, even when they were hard and painful lessons, but that God would take care of me and that I would not be alone. And because of that, I was able to walk into the future. My life had also taught me that I could cope and that I was resilient. And I could lean on that, and I could do something as scary as going to Paris that first time and following the trajectory of the story that unfolded.
I mean, that was really a shot in the dark, and the fact that it worked out the way it did is really incredible.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. I wanted my kids, they lived through it. They understood it. I wanted my grandkids, I wanted our grandkids to understand why this person they see is so responsible.
Yes.
and and so one of my granddaughters, I was driving her in the back of the car. She was about 8 years old, and the book was about to come out, and she said, Grandma, I used to think all you did was bake cookies all day.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, and that's the thing. We don't ever, if we were 20 reading a book about a midlife romance, I don't think we would be able to relate to it as much as both Robin and I can now. We're both 63. I think we can relate to this.
And
I am so glad.
And what you also write about is not just relationships for the first time, but keeping those relationships going and alive.
Yes. Yes, they need to be honored, and they need to be treasured, and we need to treat each other. Robin, it's 22 years later, and I still discover things about David all the time. And not just because we're constantly changing, but because there are nooks and crannies. When you meet each other midlife, it's incredibly exciting. It never gets stale. Mm-hmm. At least it doesn't have to.
So when you work with your clients, do you still practice psychology? You still do that?
No.
No.
I stopped teaching in 2006, and I saw my last client in 2011.
But if you were, I mean, just ask you as if you bumped into somebody and you thought you could maybe tap into that for their benefit, would you encourage them to, like Robin called it courage, you called it faith, but would you encourage them to take that step regardless of whether it was courage or faith?
Yes, there's a difference between being brave and being stupid. And I don't want to encourage people to be stupid,
right.
But fear alone is not a good enough reason to not do something.
Okay.
Oh, I love that. If
that's the only reason that you're not doing it, stop and think, is there anything rational behind that fear? Because we need to be able to feel all of our emotions. We need to be able to let them run through us. Because if we don't, if we start shutting them down, then we'll get clipped at both ends. We won't feel the sorrow, but we won't feel the joy.
Yeah, I like that.
And it's in being able to own our entire emotional spectrum and be honest with ourselves about it.
Well, in addition to author and psychologist and quilter and dancer, put philosopher too, because that's what you are.
Oh, thank you, Larry. That's why I majored in religion in college. I've always...
I'm sorry, Ronnie Beth Tower. Sounds like she's from New York, but she's from Connecticut,
yes.
San Francisco, Paris, and Connecticut. Exactly. Oh, in Ohio. In Ohio, yes,
Ohio.
Yes, but not New York. Maybe that's what New York is. Maybe New York is a like a salad or something.
Well, Tarrytown, New York is a lovely little village on the banks of the Hudson River with a brand new 3-mile bridge that has been fabulous to watch grow up. So it's a great place to have landed.
Wow.
Dr. Roni Beth Tower, I have a copy of Miracle at Midlife here. Call me if you would like the copy that I have, and it's yours. The rest of us will have to go buy it. You're getting really good reviews on Amazon. That's where I found it. And you told us about another website, Miracle
At Midlife.
www.miracleatmidlife.com.
Right, and
That's my website. And I have lots of, some of my most popular blogs are on the front page. There's, the first chapter of the book is available under book on my website. So if you want to see if the book would interest you, you could take a look at it there.
Plus, you get the benefits of sex after 50, by the way.
That's right.
Oh, and not only that, Larry and Robin, there are pictures. There are lots of pictures on the website so that David's houseboat, there are pictures of David's houseboat, there are pictures of us through the years, there are pictures of us taking the book to visit the places where it was set.
Oh, that
Nice.
is it's a wonderful book.
Well,
I love the book.
it's a movie
Yes.
in word form. It's definitely something you will visualize in your mind as you're reading it. Dr. Roni Beth, I hope we get to meet you one day. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I have enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
That was a really good interview.